Hi, folks. It's me, Daniel Smith, the host of Keepwize with Keeping Me. And today we hopefully have my co-host Amira joining us a little later in the program. But guys, it's been a hectic summer in housing, from awards to stuff that is happening on the Realtor end to I don't know if any of you have gotten your insurance costs as yet, and those things are really skyrocketing depending on where you live. So it's been really hectic, and just summer. We just had our first hurricane barrel passing through in Texas, so it's been a lot of things going on. But on today's episode with me, we have Nathaniel Crawford. He is a broker with 20 plus years experience in the industry. So we're going to jump right in and welcome Nate to this episode of Keepwize with Keeping Me. Welcome, Nathaniel Crawford.
Thank you, sir. Glad to be here.
Awesome. So we'll jump right in. The first question, tell us who is Nate Crawford and what really led you to becoming a real estate broker?
My name is Nate Crawford. I've been selling real estate almost 20 years, around 15 years now, and my background was in marketing. So I'm always been very curious about just motivations behind people and understanding ways to add value and understand their actions, and that led me to doing some stuff in entertainment during my college years. And from there, after some encouragement and insight on the how lucrative it was, a mentor of mine got me into real estate. And originally that was real estate in the Metro Atlanta area. And I reached back out to a former client that was a real estate developer when I was doing marketing stuff from the agency side. And after I got my real estate license in Georgia, and just sort of looking at the cost of living and the financial opportunity for being able to sell real estate in South Florida versus selling real estate in Atlanta, and I was like, hey, those numbers are pretty sexy. And given that at the time my grandfather was still alive, and I have deep roots here in South Florida because I grew up between South Miami and Atlanta, came back down and was blessed to sort of, unbeknownst to me, sort of walk into one of the most exclusive boutique luxury real estate brokerages here in South Florida when I started my career, which was at that time was Turnberry International Realty. And coming into that was able to see obviously the opportunity and the amazing money that can be made in that, but also was able to see the lack of diversity the higher you go up on the food chain and the price points there. And over my time, being blessed to just be in those rooms and see how things work in the real estate space from both a private equity standpoint, a development standpoint, a luxury new and pre-construction standpoint, just understanding that. And as I learned more, starting to do what I could do to mentor agents and educate folks on what was going on. And as I got more mature in the space, really began to focus more on how can I change that? How can I serve or be more visible to people who look like me in the luxury real estate space? So that's sort of what ultimately became what is now Black Luxury Realty, and what we're sort of looking to build out with the Black Luxury Network and stuff like that.
Awesome. So you started in entertainment, you got into real estate, and you moved from Atlanta to Florida. So what has that journey for the last 15 years looked like for you? You said you started at Turnberry, and now I know that you're doing your own thing. But, kind of really get into what you have seen over those years being in real estate, especially in Florida, because it is one of the hottest markets in the country. So what have you seen from then? And saying that you grew up in South Florida, what have you actually seen from a historical perspective also in terms of your family, said your grandfather, so what have you seen from them now, and how has the market really changed?
Yeah. So the the change has sort of been, obviously there's been a ton of development. There's been a lot of new construction, a lot of stuff, a lot of things getting built, and there was a level of unaffordability that was sort of built into the nature, at least I think, sort of built into the nature of South Florida with the migration patterns of people that have been coming here. So that level of unaffordability sort of was accelerated by 100 times, depending on who you ask. 20 times, 20 times, whatever. It was extremely accelerated by the pandemic, with a lot of the people that would have migrated here much slowly coming way faster, and that level of accelerated migration contributed to accelerating the levels of gentrification that you see here in places like South Miami and places like Overtown, Liberty City, and started seeing in places like Opelika, all over Broward County, Dade and Broward County. So a lot of that accelerated because so many people came, and because a lot of the motivations of developers are very much focused on building luxury product for those luxury buyers and marketing it in the way that it's been marketed historically, which is not usually an incredibly diverse marketing strategy, and not engaging those communities where they're building. That sort of trended a lot of those things to accelerate a lot of the issues that communities that were already trying to deal with managing gentrification then are now dealing with even more. And a lot of the other things that sort of the lack of diversity in the buyers, or the lack of diversity in the marketing for those high-end homes, is sort of accelerated too. So understanding how those things are sort of intertwined inextricably, how making sure that diversity in luxury marketing and luxury buyers affects how how diverse communities are affected by new and pre-construction development coming in, not just the stuff on the beach, but the stuff that's being built in communities that are in transition. And so over the last 20 years, that's what we've seen. We've seen communities that were traditionally, historically minority communities become more and more and more less diverse and less minority communities, and the prices in those communities skyrocket, which then puts a lot of pressure on people who have lived in those communities for generations and are on fixed incomes and can't necessarily handle the acceleration in their property values, because that leads to higher property taxes, and development just continues to come into those areas because they can buy low, do a lot of development, and then flip those homes for higher prices. And they're selling those homes to people who aren't necessarily familiar with the character and culture of the community, which can then accelerate a lot of other issues when it comes to just maintaining the historic value in a lot of these places. So balancing sort of the view of, hey, how can we add amenities to these communities? How can we get them to not be food deserts? How can we add stuff that the community can benefit from without displacing the current residents, or minimizing the amount of displacement that happens in those communities, is something that I think we're watching in real time South Florida sort of wrestle with, because there are some developers and some people who are building who really don't care about that, and they're just coming in and developing stuff and making a bunch of money. And there are other people who care but don't necessarily have the resources or the relationships to have meaningful conversations. And there are people like me who are trying to bridge that gap, to talk to both people on both sides of that gap. The way I like to articulate it is there are a whole lot of people that are trying to close the wealth gap from one side, and there should be people on both sides of that gap that are trying to bridge this issue of gentrification and how it's affecting the communities.
Wow. And so, as you're speaking, me, one of the things that flashed to me, because it's it's one of those conversations that we love to talk about, affordable housing, the cost of housing. So based on what you said, number one, and based on the prices in South Florida, you realize that it isn't the most affordable. To find affordable housing in South Florida, it's near $500,000. If we're really trying to be honest about it. And so I believe that I was reading an article recently talking about the missing middle. And I think that in South Florida, you may have, and you've alluded to the fact that, the developers and the persons coming in who are building who don't necessarily care about these things. But then the question on the flip side, since you grew up here, my question is, how does the implications of this possibly impact the community and the character and the ability of the community to be able to keep those residents, because people may sell at a point, but then would they find anything that is gives them a same level of community that existed, or are we just really focused on gentrified communities now where you don't speak to your neighbors, you don't know them, your house property value is really high, but that's what you're living for.
Yeah, and I think that's part of the challenge and the change. I believe in some places that's going to be the case. In some places, your communities aren't going to be the communities that we know and grew up in, where those communities were very tight knit and people knew each other. I do think in some places that can still be the case. I think there are some places that we can work to make those things, a little more prevalent. But in other places, you're going to have communities that look like condo buildings. They're townhouse communities or single family home communities where people just don't know each other and they just sort of come and go. I do think though that there are opportunities, and this is some of this is rooted in marketing, some of this is rooted in development, some of this is rooted in actively educating people in communities where they can have a trusted real estate resource. So you're not selling your grandma's house that's worth $800,000 for $400,000 because you don't know. So if the goal is to create communities that look similar or some variation of what the communities that we grew up in, where you have a diverse group of people that live there, you have people on the lower end of that financial spectrum, you have solidly middle class people, and then you have those wealthy people. So we remember communities where there were trash collectors, there were teachers, there were doctors, there were plumbers, there were business owners, and all of these people lived in one community. That's literally what Richmond Heights was 20, 30 years ago. That's not so much what it is today. But in those places, if you're educating not only the people that live there so they understand the true value of their homes, if you're educating the agents that are actually selling those properties so they understand the value, the character, the culture, the history of the community, that means they're also able to include that value, character, culture in their marketing. So when they're marketing these properties, when they're educating people about where they're buying, they understand that. So you're not just dealing with agents who are marketing communities or taking listings and just going out and selling them to the highest bidder who doesn't understand where they're buying, or they're selling them to some random investor who just wants to put a tenant in a property. And some of that's going to happen. But I think there are also people who are understand, appreciate, and are looking to own or occupy homes, luxury homes, in communities that have a rich history of culture, and making sure that your agent that you work with understands that and makes sure that the marketing of whatever listing that they're selling is reflective of that. So they're not, settling on this random investor that gave you, full price for your home, when there could be someone else that will pay just as much for that home, maybe even a little bit more, because they have kids that they want to raise in that community, because they have a emotional attachment to that community, because they were raised in that community. I've encountered many people who come back to a Liberty City or to an Overtown or to a Richmond Heights, and they've lived somewhere in the Northeast, or they've moved to California, and they come back and they see all of this development, and they say, man, I would have bought something here if I knew all of this was going on. And the reason they don't know is because of that lack of diversity in the real estate space. So the agents that are getting those listings don't know these things. They don't know the character and culture of the community. So they're advertising the properties in a very myopic way to a very small group of people. When if you have a diverse marketing strategy that makes sure that everybody knows that this property is available. So you're maximizing the opportunity. If you're a seller, you want someone that's going to get your property the most visibility possible. Is going to let everybody see it. Not, oh, I'm just going to market it in this really small group, and these are the only people that see it. And by making sure you're adding that diversity of marketing, you're maximizing the opportunity for your seller to get top dollar for their property, but you're also maximizing the opportunity for somebody who understands the character and culture of that community to buy that property. So you're not just stuck with investors that are trying to get into a community and buy low and sell high. You can also have owner occupants that are looking to buy a home in a community that can build a legacy.
Nice. I love how you frame that, and I think that it's so critically important. Just how you framed who the onus becomes or who the onus is on, because if I'm a buyer coming in, I don't have perspective, and I look towards you and your agent community to be able to say, hey, well, this is the demographic of the community. This is the the culture of this community. This is somewhere where you can possibly raise kids. These are, this is the ecosystem around where this house is built. But is that, dependent upon the agents? How do we get agents to really think in that way? Because I know you run a luxury realty brokerage, but how do you get agents to really think beyond just a transaction? Because what I heard you saying to me points to a lot of transactional nature in the real estate industry versus, okay, it's about how do I build a relationship with a buyer to make sure that it's a relational relationship versus just I sell you a house and you get into the house, I get paid, and we move on. Because you kind of alluded to it to the beginning where you were talking about, well, this is how much. And I think that the question really is, how do we create that kind of relational behavior in agents?
Yeah, and that's a recruiting and a training issue, I believe. I think there are a lot of agents who are only taught the transactional nature of real estate. And that's a component of it, because there are a lot of investors, especially in places like South Florida, who are just numbers people. They don't care about character or culture of community. They care about return on investment. They care about, what are the numbers in this community? Can I buy it low? Can I renovate it? Can I flip it? Can I buy it? Can I put a tenant in there for X amount of dollars? And that's a real thing. So it's not I don't think it's as much a question of ostracizing or saying, hey, I don't want to work with people like that. What I do think is there are those people are very diverse. I don't think that all of those, I think there are Black investors, there are white investors, there are Brazilian investors, there are Argentine investors, and all of these people are looking in different communities, just like there are extremely diverse owner occupants that are looking in communities. So it's not an issue where you're trying to sort of ease people away from the type of buyer, right? So we're not, you want to be very, very clear in that we're not steering clients. This isn't blockbusting. We're not discriminating to say we're going to take all the Black people to one community and all the Hispanics to another community. That's not what we're saying. What we are saying though is that, or what I am saying is that you want the marketing that you're providing to be diverse, but agents have to be taught that. They have to be taught that, hey, you're not just going to pull comps so it's just a numbers game, because it's not always just a numbers game. You have to be able to provide, at least provide the resources to the clients that you're working with so that they can do their due diligence on the community, so they can know what happened, so they understand the context of a community. If you live down south and you start hearing all this stuff about a parade and you don't know what Goombay is, then you may be really upset about all of this celebration when you're trying to sleep. If you don't know about the Christmas celebration at Richmond Park and there's a helicopter and you're trying to figure out what's going on, you don't understand where you moved to. So then you don't understand. The example that I give a lot very often is during graduation season. No matter where you live, most people expect and accept the fact that there will be graduation celebrations around their community. There's going to be parking issues. There's going to be traffic. There's going to be loud music. Why? Because people are graduating and they're celebrating. That is a thing. Well, in South Florida, there are a dozen other reasons why people may be celebrating in various parts of the community, whether it's a Black celebration, whether it's a Haitian celebration, whether it's a Brazilian celebration, whether it's an Argentine. So there are all types of reasons where people would be celebrating. And if that's what's going on in these communities, because they're diverse like that, understanding those cultures, understanding the festivals that happen in these communities, understanding the types of celebrations that are there and the history behind them, their origin, why they happen here, that is very valuable. And a lot of these things they're mundane to people, to those of us who live in these communities, because we know them and we take them for granted. But a lot of times when agents are new, they don't get taught to understand or even to seek out, to learn about the communities that they're selling. They just get taught numbers. They can't tell you the history of Sunny Isles or Miami Beach or any of these, or Overtown or Liberty City or Margate or Plantation, because they don't know the history of the communities. They just know the comps. And so I think it's incumbent upon people like me, on real estate brokers, trainers, recruiters, as you're bringing agents into the real estate business, especially with a lot of the changes now with the NAR lawsuit and stuff that's going on, to educate agents, because now more than ever, we have to provide meaningful value. You have to earn your commission. You can't just show up, get somebody to sign a piece of paper and make a whole bunch of money and ride off into the sunset. It doesn't work that way. It shouldn't have worked that way before. So now you have to add that value. And part of that value is making sure that your clients are educated not only just on what they're buying, so the house, bedrooms, bathrooms, roof, and all the other stuff, but where they're buying also.
Fantastic. And as you touched on that, I think my next question really goes to what has happened with NAR lawsuit, what buyers should be expecting, what sellers should be expecting, because as a broker, I know you work on both sides of the aisle. And how do you see it in terms of really, because what you just described, I have friends who would tell you the don't think that agents, really do a lot of work. And having hung out with a bunch of agents, I know that's very different from the general perception out there. So the question really is how do you ensure, and I know you as a broker, you have people working under you. How do you ensure that the value that you bring to the table as an agent and as a broker is really defined, so that your clients don't feel that it's a transactional relationship, but really get the value of, what it means to really work with an agent? And how do you believe going forward that agents can actually also do better?
Yeah. Well, I think as a result of the NAR lawsuit, we're going to see a lot of agents leave the business. So I've seen estimates that say as much as 50% of the real estate agent population won't be here, a year from now. And that, in a lot of respects, is probably going to be a good thing, because there are a lot of agents who don't know how to articulate their value, right? They don't know that. They haven't been trained that. And frankly, they're not interested in learning that. So they're used to a world where the transaction was very easy. And for a bad agent, a listing agent, or the agent on the other side of the table could carry a transaction and do most of your work, and you could still get paid. Those days are going away. So as a real estate professional, what you have to be very good at is clarity and communication on the front end, especially if you're working with a buyer, because you're going to have to start getting those buyer brokerage agreements signed, because you're going to have to start having commission conversations with clients on the front end. You have to be able to clearly articulate to them, this is what I do. This is why it's valuable to you. This is where my commission is coming from. And if you can't clearly articulate that, I think a big origin story behind this commission issue comes from a lack of clarity on actually how the commission gets paid, and being able to explain that to your buyer clients, because now they got to sign a document that says they know how you're getting paid, is going to be a very, very important part of this. And that's going to be an important part of this that a lot of agents just aren't going to be able to do. As a good listing agent, a lot of the listing agents that are there now are already doing these things. So I don't think there's going to be a ton of changes on the listing side, because listing agents, at least the good listing agents, have already been having these conversations. The big change is going to be the amount of clarity that you have to have with your buyer clients. The amount of clarity, the amount of rapport, because now you're going to start meeting people, whereas before an agent could meet somebody and take them out to see properties and do all this stuff, and they didn't have to have very much of a commitment. Now, moving forward, when you meet somebody, you got to get them to sign a document that acknowledges that they're working with you as their buyer's agent, and they know how much you're getting paid. That requires you to be able to clearly articulate your value and build a meaningful rapport with a high net worth individual in a very short period of time. That is going to take a very specific skill set that most agents will have to be trained into. For first-time home buyers, not so much, because you as the agent, you're guiding them through that process. They're trusting your expertise. They're trusting that you know what you're saying. They're trusting that you're helping them to get through the process. For high net worth people, that's going to be a much heavier lift for some agents to get them to be able to articulate their value to someone who historically hasn't had to sign anything until they were ready to make an offer. So as a result of that, I think there's going to be a lot fewer agents in the luxury space. I think the opportunity for those of us who know what we're doing is going to be incredible, for we'll be able to make way more money and build way deeper relationships with our clients. And the industry itself will be a lot smaller and probably much more transparent. So it'll be sort of uncomfortable in the transition. I don't think a lot of the stuff that's happening now is going to be around for a long time. I think some of these rules are going to change over the next 3 to 5 years, or even 2 to 3 years, just because the litigation is going to create some of that change. But at the end of the day, I think there's going to be positive change in the agent industry, because there'll be fewer agents, and the agents that are here will be more focused on providing meaningful value and education to the clients they're working with, whether those be buyers or sellers.
So the question is, as a buyer, what do I need to really be on the lookout for a potential brokerage agent, and what should I really expect? Because your company, Black Luxury Realty, really focuses on the high net worth individual, and those who are not, the normal homeowner, or home buyer. But the question really is, all buyers should be looking for something. So what should we be really looking for from our agents in terms of that relationship? And with all these rule changes, what do I need to consider as a buyer as I get into the market?
Uh, the the way I would sum that up in one word would be clarity. Clarity. You want to work as a buyer. You want to work with an agent that can clearly articulate to you what they do, how they do it, why they do it, and how they're getting paid. That at the end of the day, that's what this sort of boils down to. You as a buyer will ultimately, or could be ultimately, responsible for paying your buyer's agent's commission or a portion thereof if whatever the commission they agree to you with is not being paid by the listing agent. That is the sort of the crux here. In most cases, I think in the vast majority of cases, there will not be much of a change there. I think a lot of the co-brokering commissions is still going to be in effect. A listing agent is still going to offer in some shape, form, or fashion, whether it's from the name of it changes. I think the 3% or 2.5% or whatever that compensation number is still going to come from the listing agent. But I don't think that's going to change. I think as a buyer, though, your conversation before you sign a buyer brokerage agreement with any buyer's agent should be one that they walk you through literally what they are going to do step by step through your real estate journey. So how does this start? How do we start your home search? Once we start your home search, how does this look once we get under contract with the property? How does this look as we get past the inspections? How does this look when it's time for us to close? How does this look after closing? More, I think over 85% of buyers cannot tell you the name of the agent that sold them the property they live in right now. That is a testament to the lack of continual relationships that these agents have with the buyer, with the buyers they work with. That is going to change. That has to change. So that because if you aren't building those long-term relationships, especially with the changes now, you won't be able to have a sustainable career in real estate. So as a buyer, when you're talking to agents, clarity is going to be the key. Understanding what they do, why they do, if it's going to cost you money, how does it cost you money? What scenarios are there that unfold here that make you responsible for the buyer's agent's commission? And how much of that commission would you be responsible for? How much of that commission do you think you should be responsible for? How much of that commission can you afford to be responsible for? And these aren't questions that you as a buyer should have to answer alone. These are questions that the agent that you're interviewing should be able to help you answer. So the short version of this is clarity, making sure that you are super clear as a buyer or even a seller, but definitely as a buyer with the agent that you're working with, what they do. And if they can't articulate to you in a very clear and concise fashion, this is the value I provide to you as a buyer, then you probably shouldn't be working with them.
Wow. Those are some pretty strong words, Nate. Boy. But I think that you ultimately, hit the nail on the head, because I remember a conversation earlier this week with somebody on the finance end, and we were really having this discussion about, understand most homeowners or most buyers at least don't necessarily understand the whole process of the journey of, buying a property. And, there is a remarkable stat, just like the one you quoted about 85% of homeowners. I think that 72% of persons spend more time shopping. 72% of buyers accept the first offer that they're given on a mortgage. So most people spend more time shopping for a television or a new car than understanding the details around a mortgage. And while it may not be incumbent upon an agent to necessarily go into all the details of it, I think that a good agent would help you. Okay, this is how you think about it, or this is what you navigate, because
Yes.
there is the issues coming up of affordability. There is the issue coming up of insurance. There is the issue coming up of property taxes. I saw a wild stat that says 92% of millennials are not expressing buyer's remorse about buying properties in 2021 and 2022 when we were in COVID years when people were spending money and buying houses, property, sight unseen, etc. So I think that some of that reckoning is coming up now. So the question really starts with you as Black Luxury Realty. How do you ensure that your clients um, build a relationship with you, or that you build a relationship with your clients whereby these aren't the things that they have to worry about? If I come to Nate and his brokerage company, ensuring that this property that I have, I'll be able to navigate most of the issues. And even if I don't know, I can pick up the phone and say, hey, Nate, how do I deal with this?
Yes. Yeah. I think there are multiple there are multiple layers to that issue. Much like with the millennials who bought homes, in 2020, 2021, if you bought a home at a 3% interest rate and you're not happy with it, knowing today that interest rates are 7.5%, I think on a very fundamental level, whoever helped you buy that home didn't educate you for you to see what you have. Because that's a core thing there. If you regret buying a home at a time when today you wouldn't be able to afford that home, that says a lot about the person who helped you to buy that home. So that's a really big education thing there. To have buyer's remorse on a home that you probably couldn't afford today, that's a lot. So I think and I'm going to keep coming back to those two things. Clarity and communication are going to be the big hallmarks of this. I think one of the byproducts of the changes, the shifts that we're seeing in the industry as a whole, and we've done this for years at Black Luxury. I did this when I was with Turnberry. I did it when I was with Sotheby's. So long before I started my own brokerage, I understood the value of treating all clients like luxury clients. Like that's the vast majority of the services that we offer, not all of them, because some of them are pricey and they are reserved for luxury clients because there's a significant dollar amount attached to them. But communication doesn't cost anything. Making sure that you can connect your clients with certain resources so they understand what's going on doesn't cost anything. Making sure that your client understands that the mortgage broker's commission is negotiable too, that the title company's commission is negotiable too. Like the real estate broker in this transaction isn't the only person whose price is negotiable. But if nobody explains that to you, you don't know. So as a brokerage, as a real estate professional, as a good person, I think understanding that clarity and communication is going to be key here. One of the things that I've told my clients since I've been selling real estate is we've pushed back closings because clients had questions about their mortgage documents. So, hey, I'm excited about closing. We're getting a great deal and the inspection went well, but I need to understand what this is on page 3, paragraph 2. And if nobody's going to tell me that, then I can't sign this. And having clarity with your clients so they understand this transaction is about you. You need to be comfortable and clear on what's going on. There is historically, there have been a lot of agents, a lot of people in the real estate transaction that become so focused on getting the deal across the finish line that they lose the sight of the fact that the people in the transaction are more important than the transaction itself. The buyer is in most cases the largest transaction of their life. The seller is moving on to something, whether that be because they're selling because of a family issue or they're upgrading or downgrading. There's all types of moving parts here that we as real estate professionals have to stand in a space where you're a therapist, you're a consultant, you're a friend, you're an advisor, you're doing all of these things. So you have to be what I call a master of your resources. If I don't have the answer, I'm usually no more than 2 phone calls away from whatever you need to know. And making sure that the agents in my office have that same level of expertise to be able to, I'm here to help you. I'm your real estate resource to guide you through this. And as you get to those higher price points, you become more of a, not just a real estate resource, but a lifestyle resource. It's sort of where we started. When you're educating people on the character and culture of a community, that means you're telling them about the local restaurants too. You're telling them about the sports in the area, the golf club, the swimming pool, the schools. Like, all of these things become a very meaningful part of the transaction. But that's a foundation that's built on a foundation of, I understand what you're trying to accomplish here, and you trust me with this. One of the things that I think a lot of good agents have had to deal with, especially when it comes to commissions, is that they don't always tell their clients all the battles they have to fight on their behalf. You don't come back and tell your client all of the issues that you had with the HOA, or the issues that you had to go through with the inspection company, or the issues you had to deal with the agent on the other side of the table, the negotiations. You just make them all go away. You fix it to get the deal across the finish line. Well, now that level of transparency, that level of clarity becomes way more important. So you still have to fix those issues, but you have to have some sort of way to articulate what you accomplished, what you did when your client wasn't looking, so that they understand when they see that closing statement and you just made $120,000 at closing, that you didn't just lay down and make a bunch of money, that you earned that commission. We make big commissions on these big deals in real estate, but that's because we do a lot of work. And that's what has to be very clear now, where it wasn't always that clear in the past. So making sure that clarity and communication are sort of the cornerstones of relationships that you're building. And as a buyer, that you are comfortable having those conversations. The vast majority of buyers, and sellers for that matter, usually work with the first agent they talk to. And that's not a bad thing if the first agent that you talk to is a good agent. But you have to be able to know that first agent you talked to answered your questions in a way that made you feel comfortable working with them. Not, I worked with this first agent because I don't feel like looking for other agents. So we as real estate professionals have to make sure we're holding that standard. And I don't think that the mediocre agents are going to be able to build or maintain sustainable businesses in light of what NAR, the lawsuit, and just the changes in the real estate market are starting to sort of present, especially in Florida, with insurance costs going up, with the amount of older buildings that are going to be coming on the market. There's a lot of opportunity here, to be clear. There's a ton of opportunity, but a lot of that opportunity is going to be wrapped in challenges, and it's going to look like a lot of hard work. So if you want to have a very meaningful career, especially in Florida, given a lot of the challenges that we're going to be facing, there's a lot of opportunity for you to be able to make a really good living in real estate. But that's going to require that you really have the resources, tools, and communication skills to be able to provide meaningful value to both buyers and sellers.
Yeah, I was just so engrossed with your answer, Nate. And a lot of what you've said, it resonates. I need to get you as my broker. If I ever decide to sell. I love a lot of the values that you've espoused, and I think it's really critical. But it does, beg the question to me, because you've really highlighted what is the value proposition that I need to be looking at as a homeowner. But I think that when you were speaking, it really threw me back to the start after you said, a lot of homeowners go, or a lot of buyers go with the first agent they talk to. Just like that, 72% of persons accept the first mortgage. And so, again, I think that, the whole question of due diligence needs to be something that we get people really acclimatized to, because this is the most important decision that you're going to be making around your life, um, especially asset wise. And so it does require more than just the first person who walks up. I remember even in my closing of my house, having sitting down and reading every single page of my contract. And I remember the lawyer was like, "Oh, you don't need to read every page." And I was like, "I'm paying for this. I'm reading every page." And they're like, well, and I was pushing back on issues. And I remember they were like, well, it's already agreed to. I'm like, okay, yeah, we need to change some things here because this won't roll the way I expect it to roll. Um, but, that is understanding, and that's just not taking everything that you're handed. And I think that, both buyers and sellers need to become smarter in terms of the whole transaction process. So I think that that is, for me at least, from what you said, really resonated with me. So we have like 2 more minutes. So um, at Black Luxury Realty, your focus is really on the customer, um, and ensuring you meet the consumer's needs. And as we wrap up, what you've really said to me resonates in clarity. And for me, I love to use the word transparency. Um, if you had a magic wand, Nate, to be able to fix some of the challenges that you've seen, and we've gone through a myriad from, cultural stuff to some affordability issues to really how you treat clients. If you had a magic wand and you had the ability to change some of the issues in the industry, what would it be?
That I would address are tied to sort of what you just alluded to. I don't think that it's going to be, given the way the world works and just sort of how life affects us all. I don't think we're ever going to get to a place where buyers or sellers are able to do a significant amount of due diligence on the buying or selling of their home, for better or for worse. So that's, I don't know whether good thing or bad thing, but I just don't think they're going to do it. So if I could wave a wand on one part of that, I would ensure that all of the agents that they're working with are operating from a place of integrity and education and clarity. So if the first agent that you work with, the first agent that you talk to is the agent that you're most likely going to work with, just like the first mortgage that you experience is the one you're most likely going to take, I would like that to be a good agent that understands how to communicate and help you achieve your real estate goals. If we know that, the same way that I would like that to be a good mortgage. So that would sort of be the first half of that, to increase the quality of real estate professionals consistently. And the second half of that would be that developers understand the value in diversity of their development portfolio. Right now, the lion's share of developers focus very heavily on luxury marketing and luxury product because that's where the lion's share of their profits are, and they are following where the dollars are going. I believe that you could build solidly middle class homes in most markets, not in all, but in most markets, and still make solid returns. And there are not very many developers that are focused on doing that. So increasing developers' focus on middle class and upper middle class inventory, and in increasing real estate professionals' focus on clarity, communication, and education would be the magic things that I would change if I had that one.
Fantastic. Nate, thank you very much for your time. This has certainly been enlightening. And I think that, August 17th is the date when a lot of these changes are proposed to come in. So we'll see how it goes. But would love to get you back to hear how your experience has been, and, what your clients, actually think about, all of these new changes, and how it possibly impacts your business and what you're building. And I also want to really dive in more to like what does Black Luxury Realty look like, especially in the South Florida market where you have such a diverse and international population. But we've had a really good conversation, and it was really insightful. And a lot of the things I think that buyers, sellers, the ecosystem needs to really reframe a lot of how we think about these issues, because at the end of the day, it's about serving the end user, which is the buyers and the sellers. So thank you for your time, and we look forward to having you on our next episode.
Absolutely, man. I appreciate you having me, man. I always love our conversations, man. Looking forward to doing it again.
Thank you, Nate.